Namaste once again. And if I don't see any of you tomorrow evening, we also have a satsang tomorrow, then my special and very, very warm greetings of Christmas 2015 to you in advance. And I was speaking a few days ago in the satsang that, come any festival as children, children feel some of these things more. I was once reading a story about an architect who is world renowned and, went across the world, but he was from a very small village in France. And when once he went for a long vacation back home, he realized that his village was very picturesque. So in the olden times, there was a mental asylum there. The people would choose such uplifting areas because there was no cure, medicines for these things, except shock therapy and some beauty around and quietude around people. And when he went there, he saw that the mental asylum was now a primary school. Now, he was a very sensitive person, so he was intrigued. He didn't like the idea so much, and he was intrigued, and he went there, and he saw that children, when they had to go to the toilet, they would ask one another, and especially hold each other's hand and run through a certain corridor, which he recognized was the corridor in which was the electrotherapy room, shock treatment room. So he wrote in his book that certain things, certain vibrations, they leave a footprint which adults may just, maybe even the principal of the school knew this was where shock therapy was given. And he said, remove the furniture and paint the room. But children, somehow not knowing anything, was sensitive to it. So I was mentioning the last satsang that, come a festival time, children are the first who start enjoying. It's like they know vacations are coming, they know that we'll get gifts, new clothes, but maybe there's an underlying reason for that. And Swami Kriyananda was a very practical man, but in him I found wisdom which before I heard him, read him, I didn't think about it because it was not in my neighborhood. I said I didn't grow up in such kind of wisdom, and so I thought it was non-existent. In childhood, I remember only one thought. Once people were talking about Mahabharata and gods coming and going, and it felt so real for a moment. I thought, I wonder there's another book beyond the story of Mahabharata which says you can find God by doing this. But it was a very momentary thought, and it was lost again till I rediscovered now that such is possible. But coming back to Swami Kriyananda ji, he once said that when he was seeking meaning in life, he looked around. He lived in Europe, America, traveled to India, and he said that he looked around, and he was very well read, and he says, I realized after some searching and meeting dead ends that the only people who have made any contribution worthwhile in this world and who are being remembered today were all religious. And he says he was against religion. He didn't believe in all those dogmas and traditions and rituals, but here he was being convinced by the facts and reality, looking at the structures around him, that it is not the businessman, it is not the politician, it is not a sports person who endures across millennia. It is Buddha, it is Ram, it is Krishna, it is Jesus. And especially he said Jesus' life is very interesting because he was very recent. He says we can study history, we can actually go to that village which is so preserved where things happen around his life. So that is the beauty of, studying the life of some of these things, the great saints. And this afternoon I was with somebody and we were going through the, you might say, mundane aspect of looking for an apartment, asking the rates and bargaining. And I asked him about this plot which is there in the neighborhood which belongs to a royal family, the Devas. And I said, do you know any? You've been living here a very long time. Do you know the Devas? And he says, oh no, but maybe somebody who is remotely connected to them. And I said, I looked up their website. They now are in Madhya Pradesh, but their ancestry goes back up to 300 BC. And I said, the only thing which they themselves, they are kings, they have repeatedly documented in that is the fact that so-and-so king of our lineage at some point after his son's marriage renounced everything and went to this forest. So there are 8-9 people in their lineage who went to different forests. So we may not realize that that's what we want to do, not run to a forest, but seek something more than what will pass. You see, nobody remembers those kings. They didn't even talk about what the king did. They said, this king in one line, went to a forest to find something. And so it makes us think, it was making me think at the same time that what is happening around us seems so important. But maybe it's true, so like Swami says, that God has created this dream drama. Our job is try to, because otherwise we would have no real job. The Bhagwad Gita says the summum bonum of our life is to find God. God is joy. God is freedom. God is the ability to do what we want to do. And that is represented in the saints. And for a brief moment, I want to speak about Christ, Jesus Christ. Jaya ji will come and speak about the mission of Christ and the great ones. But Jesus Christ, we know, lived 2000 years ago. And we may say, once somebody was arguing with me that if he was a yogi, why did he die at the age of 33? He was being very productive, that much that person agreed, but he says he was selfish. He should have lived longer. If he could raise people from the dead, he should have done this and he should have treated himself. And I told him, I said, look, they are not fighting, against God's plan. There is beauty, there's variety. And let's just accept what happened and take the positive lessons from there. But Jesus continues to inspire half of the planet to this day. Whether we understand his mission, the mission of the great ones is not understood sometimes by their closest disciples. That is what Yogi Ramaya told Swamiji. Yogi Ramaya told Swamiji, you should try once in a while in your meditation to practice this. And Swami says, but sir, that's not what my guru taught. And Swami says, with deep love, lovingly, Yogi Ramaya looked at him. He was a very great saint. And he says, if all the disciples of each guru understood what the guru was speaking, we would not see this fight, conflict and bickering that we see in the world everywhere in every religion. Now, why do the gurus not simplify? Swami says, why did not Jesus really put it down in the form of a rule? That destroys the spirit. They are here, they do not compromise on truth, but they want us to grow towards it. One of the saints who grew towards Christ's, actually, he enacted his life, you might say, was Saint Francis of Assisi. Paramhansa Yoganandaji, when he was returning to India in 1935, crossed Assisi and wrote in a letter to Rajarsi Janakananda, he says, Christ, I felt him in every street and corner of Assisi. He said that he also had a beautiful vision of Saint Francis. But Saint Francis was just like you and me. I relate to his story very deeply. It's very reassuring for one. It is very sweet. It is very human. And such was his love. And Master says Saint Francis is the patron saint of Master's own mission for this Dwapara Yuga. So Saint Francis, at one time, actually, when he was quite evolved, he went to the Pope. He had, by that time, some monks had gathered around him, and they said, Father, we should start our own, group. And why do we keep? He would send them to different monasteries that learn this, practice that. But at some point, they felt that it was not in resonance to their heart's feelings. They were actually creating, the spirit is ever new. They were creating a very different approach to renunciation and devotion to God. And he said that they went to the Pope at that time to take his permission to start a new group or sect of Christianity. And you can imagine the Pope and the Pope's advisor said, Father, if you keep encouraging this, every now and then in every village there'll be a sect and we would have no control over these people. Everybody will stand up and say, this is how I want to worship God, and you have given me the permission. I do not want to follow what the Pope actually or the church actually approves of. So the Pope was in two minds, and he told Francis, he says, give me some time. Let's meet tomorrow. But he was not at all, it was not an optimistic meeting. So St. Francis went back, and it is said all night he prayed to Jesus and God, if you would like this small group to be formed, please guide me, help me, I've done my part. He had traveled quite a bit on foot to just come there. And next morning, it is said that the Pope had to send somebody to fetch Saint Francis, because in the night the Pope had a dream in which the church, there was a big building he was looking at the building, and suddenly he saw the building started shaking, cracks appeared, and it started tilting on one side, and intuitively he understood that is the church. And then he says, and he saw that as it was falling, there was one small monk in brown clothes who was holding it like this, very joyfully. And that monk was the person he had met that morning. It was Saint Francis, and he asked him to come. He says, I give you my full permission. Do as you feel like. Because what was Saint Francis asking? He was simply asking, allow us and our band to revive the way of Christ, to live in poverty, which Master says in our yug and time has now been translated to simplicity. What is the point of complicating life? Allow us, he said, to live in devotion. Allow us, give us the freedom to express our love to you, God, as we feel to. And he was the one who started the tradition of this small creche we are seeing. There's a baby Jesus. I remember when I went to Assisi in 2011 with a group of us. Everything is in euros. Very expensive. And I like to buy small artifacts and gift items. So I would touch a small statue and it was 15 euros, 10 euros. And I said, what do I do? And the smallest item over there was a baby Jesus. There was a tray full of them. And I picked up and it says, like half of a euro. So I said, that's something I can buy. But then I looked at it carefully and said, it's too childish. And I kept it down. But, it is so beautiful that Saint Francis said that now 1200 years had to pass. Mind you, he lived in the 13th century before somebody could revive that tradition. Christianity had to pass through Kali Yuga, the Dark Ages, and actually it is said in the history that by that time that Saint Francis appeared, people had even stopped celebrating Christmas and the birth of Christ in Christianity. So he comes along and he said, not only will we celebrate, he was inspired to reenact the scene. And he became, I don't know which part he must have played, but he got all the monks, all the people in the town, and he says, you become this person, you become the father, you become the mother. And he had everybody wear costumes. And I don't know, there was a baby Jesus also. He actually went out and got an ox and a donkey, which it was said that they were present when Christ was born. And they played it out in a manger just to reenact and again to feel, why did our Father, why was he born in this place? What did it mean? Because he was certainly so great. His heart was convinced that Jesus was great. But they were trying to understand every minute aspect of his life. Why poverty? Why in this manger? Why outside the comforts of a home? A child is usually born in his home, but they were born in exile, you might say. And then he would say, he's inside us. We are all like him. We are in exile. We are in deep poverty. We don't realize it, but we are in deep poverty, he says. And the more we pray to him, the more we love him, the more these things will happen. Now, some people saw that as very naive and beautiful till after Saint Francis passing. During his life, he had told many people not to describe their visions or experiences of him. And one of the experiences that a monk repeatedly had was he would see Saint Francis sitting, maybe in meditation, I don't know, and with baby Jesus on his lap. And people were coming and there was straw on his lap, and they would take one straw, or somebody would touch Jesus, somebody would touch Saint Francis or his robe. And he said that after Saint Francis passing, he says, I saw that whoever came close to that scene and touched it was healed. Then another time, Master Paramahansa Yogananda ji said that Saint Francis, his devotion became so great that he prayed directly to the form of Christ, and Christ started in the last few years of Saint Francis's life, appeared every night in the body to him. I don't even know what to think of that. What a blessing is that? You can clarify your doubts. You can ask him questions about the techniques. You can ask him if you were right or wrong. You can ask him so many things. He can, if he's coming, that is like in the Bhagwad Gita, they say that Master says, remember, as much as we are being challenged, that book was written with a smile on Krishna's face, that we should realize that God is already with us. But like he told Saint Teresa of Avila, who was a great saint too, she once asked Jesus, she would have visions. She says, I'm an old, tired lady. Why do you want me to go from monastery to monastery by foot and reform your work? You are all competent. You should do it. You can do it by yourself. And the response she got was, to see your will, daughter, that you are all my children. What will you do? So once we understand God, Christ, once somebody told me, I don't believe Buddha was God or Buddha talked of God. I said, have you asked him? He said, how can I ask Buddha? I said, pray to him. You're a Buddhist, pray. He said, never occurred to me to ask that question. And then he had tears in his eyes. He was a guy who was washing the car. And he says, I feel Buddha knew God. I said, my Guru says he was God. He was an avatar. So likewise with Christ, let's pray to him in this season. And let's see how in silent ways he will guide our life, inspire us. He certainly was the first in our line of gurus. He was the one who requested Babaji to release the teachings of Kriya Yoga, of individual devotion, but practice and experience of God. So I'm eternally grateful to Jesus Christ and these great gurus, and for our masters to bring the teachings so smoothly and joyfully in our lives. I'll invite Jaya ji to come and speak about the Bhagwad Gita.
Thank you, Aditya. Of course, when you pick a reading from the Bhagavad Gita, you have to pick this one. You don't this one, but it's appropriate anyway. There's a number of them. O Bharata, whenever virtue, dharma declines, and adharma is in the ascendant, I incarnate myself on earth, appearing from age to age in visible form. I come to destroy evil and to reestablish virtue. Before I forget, just one additional thing related to the life of St. Francis that still lives on today. He mentioned how he started this tradition of this little scene that is in a very miniature form here, but people also still enact this in large form too in the West and in churches around the world. But at those gatherings that St. Francis would have of getting everybody to enact this, they would also sing. And this began, the tradition has it that this was the beginning of the tradition that is passed down at Christmas time to this day of singing Christmas carols. And that tradition is said to have been started by St. Francis. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking more at the retreat. During Christmas Day, we're going to be having a class and a discussion discourse. And I want to talk tomorrow about a little bit about Christ, his mission, Christianity, and this whole topic when I have more time. But this evening, I only have a short time, and so I can only pick out one or two elements that I'd like to share about it. But if you're interested in this, I encourage you to come tomorrow, and it'll be a lovely day out at the retreat that we can have together. Christ, of course, as I picked that reading, was an avatar. He came with a special message. He came with a message that was appropriate for his time, and he had to express that message in his time, just as all the great avatars do. And they come at their time in history, and they use the situation and the way that they come into this world. Swami Kriyananda asked Paramahansa Yogananda, who had come into this world as a fully liberated soul, and in his own right was an avatar. He asked him, he says, is this a new religion? And he says, oh no, not a new religion, but it is a new expression. And that's what an avatar does. He comes into the world for no particular purpose of their own, but to fulfill, you could say, divine will. And so it was, Christ came, and he too gave an expression. Now I say the word Christ. The word, his name was Jesus, actually. Christ, Christos, in Greek, means the anointed one, the chosen one. The chosen one, in this case, by Jewish tradition, was the chosen one that was prophesied to return and deliver the Jews into a promised land, to remove all oppression. And in that deliverance, he was the Messiah, would come, return. And of course, if you look at it from a mystical side, what is it that's returning to take away those things that bind us, to free us from oppression, to deliver us into that promised land? It was interpreted and looked for very outwardly, but you can see that the inward message was there. Christ comes. That Christ, that Messiah, comes to deliver us, to lift us up into that promised land, that land of beauty, that land where we're not bound. It was that land beyond the ego limitations, and that was promised to come again. And it's promised that exists even today to come to each one of us. It's a destiny for each one of us to be lifted up, and the Messiah will comes in the form of that realization of the Christ consciousness which is in each one of us. And this birth of Christ that we celebrate in this nice little scene here we're talking about the birth of that Christ consciousness within each one of us, that aspiration that every soul has to be free. And that's what is represented in this historical event that is symbolic, but yet has a reality of its own as well. Christianity, the question, here we are on the other side of the world from where I grew up in America. It's certainly not on the other side of the world from Israel or Palestine where Christ lived, but nevertheless, another world away. And we often wonder what it is, and what is Christianity? What is it? It's, as Christ said, or as Jesus said, no, as Master said, he said, Jesus Christ died 2,000 years ago, but his teachings have been crucified ever since, because the message that Christ brought was a wonderful one, and it still lives on in its own form, but yet that deeper inner message of Christianity that he also brought lies fallow to a large degree. It's not understood. And this was Master's purpose for coming, to revive that. As Aditya mentioned, he came at the request of Christ appearing to Babaji, requesting to somebody to be sent to the West to revive the original teachings of Christianity, to that the noble taper, as it said, the noble taper of inner communion burns low, though still lit on lower altars of good works. It burns low. Let us together, united in that Christ love, set lights ablaze on the high altar once again. And so a new message a new expression was sent out through the instrumentality of these great gurus of our line. There was a story that Paramahansa Yogananda used to tell, that when he was in America, he would travel in those days by train in 1920s, 1930s. And he was on the train once, and of course he had his long hair, and here he was obviously a person from a foreign land, and perhaps he was even wearing his robes at that time, although he didn't always wear his robes publicly when he was traveling, but I suspect maybe in this case, maybe he was, because there was a man in the carriageway in the train, pacing back and forth, and every once in a while kind of glaring at Master and looking at him. And finally, he couldn't restrain himself. Very crowded, a crowded coach, many people there. He couldn't restrain himself anymore, and he looks at Master and he says, "Do you believe in Jesus Christ as the Son of God?" Very angry. And Master very calmly says, "Well, yes, I believe Jesus Christ was a Son of God." And, saying it in his own understanding, it was the Son of, he says, "Unless you believe," as the man said in a very belligerent